Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Sheets, and I'm going to be going over the MLB slate for this evening. I'm going to be doing it solo today, so we're going to do things, I guess, a little bit differently. We're going to go through kind of a top-down approach to the players. We're going to go over who looks to be the best pitchers from a DFS perspective, who looks to be the best stacks, and then we're going to build. A couple of early lineup builds using SaberSim. So let's, again, we're not going to go game by game, but we are going to pull up the schedule at least so we at least know what games we're looking at. So hold on a minute. Let's, actually, we may as well go game by game. Let me just see something. I don't know where the pain of the games are here. I guess I'll pull up DraftKings. Hold on 1 second. Okay. Pull this up, then we'll share my screen, and then we'll be ready to go. Okay, so first thing I'd like to do is get a look at see how the slate kind of plays out here. We have 1, 2, 3 7 o'clock games, and 7:40, and then a couple of 8s. Then we finish off with Milwaukee at LA and KC at Oakland. Next thing I want to do is get at least a quick look and see what weather issues exist as of now. And it looks as though Tampa, Minnesota, is that even on the slate? Let's see. Yeah, Tampa, Minnesota is orange. So that's one thing that we do have to keep an eye on. All right. Baltimore Yankees first, then Boston, Toronto. Let's not do that. Let's just pull up the sheets, and we'll take a look and see what looks good here. So we're rating these, again, by Sheets value score, which is a good combination, I think, of fantasy points and point per dollar. We want to reward, high upside. We want to reward raw fantasy points, not just play what's got the highest point per dollar outcome. So as you'll see, when you rate them by Sheets value score, the top overall pitcher is surprisingly Alec Marsh at 7,600. And then you have kind of a group of 3 here, that being Pablo Lopez, Framber Valdez, and Chris Bassett. Now you'll see that all 3 of these are more expensive than Alec Marsh. So it looks like Alec Marsh is going to be a very reasonable SP2 on this slate, whether it be Lopez and Marsh, Valdez and Marsh, or Bassett and Marsh. Tanner Houck is the most expensive on the slate, but he's not really projecting that well at all. And then actually, so Bassett is in that same group. And then there's a little bit of a drop to Cortez and Canning at 5,500. And then you're really into the dregs here. Tobias Myers, it seems to be a little bit over-owned here at 15%. I would expect him to be a little lower owned given these projections. And that's really the main set of pitchers. So it's Marsh, then Lopez, Valdez, and Bassett, and then Cortez. So let's take a look at those matchups, like where they're coming from. So first of all, interestingly, Alec Marsh is in the last game of the night, which is it's interesting. I always like to have as much flexibility as possible. So to play Alec Marsh certainly makes a lot of sense. He is against Oakland, which is why he's projecting all that well. Now, Pablo Lopez, I mentioned before, is one of the top pitchers on the slate, but he's one of the guys that has pretty decent weather issues. So we have to keep an eye on that. Valdez for Houston, who's he up against today? At White Sox. And this has become a thing. Whoever's playing Oakland, whoever's playing the White Sox is just going to get a good projection. Chris Bassett rounds out again that top group, and he is home against Boston. So that matchup is certainly not as pristine, which is one of the reasons why he's probably going to project a little worse, probably going to be a little lower owned. So I think this is a pretty solid kind of group. You know, Marsh and Valdez with both great matchups. Lopez has some weather risk. Bassett kind of a tweener. His matchup isn't great, but his price is pretty good. And then you have Nestor Cortez, who's kind of by himself next. And again, this matchup is not great against Baltimore. Not to mention the fact that it's 1,000,000 degrees out there tonight. That's actually my own weather report. I think it's 1,000,000 with the heat index. And then you have Griffin Canning, who I mentioned pretty quickly. He's only 5,500. So if you do want to spend up for hitting, something like Canning with Marsh or something like that, you could certainly do that. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about the hitting then. Let's pull up the stack tool and we'll see what that looks like. And again, we're going to give you guys a tour of what I look at before I even build anything. Hey, what's up, Mike? So we rate these stacks by these different columns, right? Remember, on the left is just, you know, raw points. In other words, which stack or which 5-man stack from each of these teams is going to generate the highest median raw fantasy points. And you'll see the Dodgers rated #1 by a huge amount, okay? And as a matter of fact, there's a full 8-point drop to the next group. And that next group is going to be Houston, Milwaukee, Yankees, and San Francisco. Notably absent from this group is Colorado. I guess we'll get back to that. Now, another way you could rate these guys is by point per dollar, and that's what value stack is. So if you wanted to do that, and here, interestingly, the Dodgers also look like the best point per dollar play on the slate too, which is kind of scary. But you are getting different guys, right? So you'll see when you're looking at the top, overall points, you're getting Ohtani, Freeman, etc. Where if you're doing point per dollar, you're getting the Vargas, Chris Taylors, and Kiki Hernandez's over there. So different. And now Texas kind of moves up a little bit. And you're starting to see San Francisco again. So San Francisco was okay. Houston was okay. And when you rate them on the right for modified stack, that's essentially Sheets value score as applied to stack. So once again, you have the Dodgers #1 overall. Then again, San Francisco and Houston. So it looks as though if you had to identify the top 3 overall stacks, these would be the 3. San Francisco, the Dodgers, and Houston. And then if you wanted to go down a little bit, you have Milwaukee, Colorado, Texas, Atlanta. And what I'd like to do is find teams that kind of rate well in both columns over here. So Atlanta looked okay over here. Okay, so maybe move them up a little bit. But I think it's definitely Dodgers, San Francisco, and Houston are the top 3. So what have we determined here before we start running stuff? Well, we determined that we like Marsh and then one of these others, like Lopez, Valdez, and Bassett, right? Those top 4. And what do we decide we like in stacks? Dodgers, Houston, and San Francisco. So what I'd like to do just kind of right now is pull up SaberSim and run a build of, say, 5,000 lineups with my existing projections and see whether my instincts kind of match what SaberSim would come up with. So I've inputted my projections instead of SaberSim's, and I could build, it doesn't matter how many I rank, but we're going to build 5,000 lineups. And that's a lot, but in baseball, it's really not that much. There's so many combinations of baseball lineups. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at a couple of things. We're going to see, how the distribution of lineups looks when you're dealing with all 5,000, and then we'll figure out good ways to rate maybe the top 50. And we'll talk about contest sims and hopefully make this somewhat useful. All right, so we built 5,000 lineups, which is not that many actually for baseball, but I think it's at least a good representation of what we would play if we had 5,000 lineups to play. And it's also a pretty good estimate of what the field's going to do. So let's take a look. So we're going to keep it in min uniques 1. We're not going to make any changes. And when we look at this, in the overall pool, it looks as though pitching-wise, Alec Marsh would be the top overall pitcher, right? 26% of the pool would have Alec Marsh. And actually, Griffin Canning would be at 19%, okay? Followed by Chris Bassett. Now, what you'll see, though, is next to it, the exposure column. And what the exposure means is the percentage of my 50 lineups that have them. So how do you interpret this? You know, what this means is that Griffin Canning is, you know, the more lineups down the list you get, the more likely he's going to show up, but he's going to show up, okay? And likewise, you have Alec Marsh, who, you know, he's only showing up in 26% of lineups, but a lot of them are at the top of that 5,000. So again, Marsh, Bassett, Lopez, these are the guys I spoke about. Savali I didn't get to, so that's interesting. Okay. Now, when we look at the stacks, once again, the overall pool exposure of the 5,000 lineups, not surprisingly, is going to spread it out. And there it is, Dodgers and Houston, numbers 1 and 2. And San Francisco is number 4. But intriguingly, when you look at the exposure of this group of 50, Dodgers don't even show up at all. Like you're getting 90% of your top 50 is going to be your San Franciscos, okay? So before we even get into doing the sims and all this stuff, let's think about how these things were rated. So the way these things are rated right now is this one, the Saber Sim identified formula. What it feels is kind of typical for large slates, like what you'd want to play. And if you want, you can get into this and click the eyeball and see the formula for this, which is, it's pretty aggressive. I mean, they are factoring in the 99th percentile outcome, and you are digging the average adjusted ownership. So this is pretty aggressive to the point where I don't know if this is actually going to represent what the field's going to do. So that's one thing. The second thing is, let's see if we can't, you know, apply these to the actual contest that we're playing. Okay, so let's save this group, for example, to our contests, which we already pre-entered. And we're going to right-click these, and we're going to try to identify what the field is likely to play, because we have to compare our lineups to something. And this is where kind of the art comes in. I mean, if you wanted, you could use the regular Saber Sim metrics. In other words, add contest sims. It has this kind of pool of lineups, like high stakes 20 max, that it feels is appropriate. But if you feel as though your 5,000 lineups provide a little bit better representation of what the field's going to do, then what you could do is replace it, this high stakes 20 max, with what your build was, which happened to have been build 5. So let's actually do that for these tournaments today. Add contest sim. We're going to change this from flagship to build 5. Ball 4, we're going to change this again to build 5. So what we're doing is basically simulating these our 5,000 lineups against themselves, if that makes any sense, and see what our top 50 is going to look like in that type of simulation. So let's run the contest sims. And I do think that this is probably the bare minimum that you should do when you're using SaberSim, is run your lineups, do one contest sim, and then you could tweak. But I think you should at least start with that. So let's, for the want to do the Mega 8s? Now let's wait for the lottery to load here. That's the what's it called, the relay throw? It'll show up here in a second, right? Where are you? I know I ran it because it's in contest sim settings. Let's see. There it is. So bat flip. Risk-adjusted ROI. That's what we want to sort by. And let's see what we get now. So in all stacks, we'd be getting actually 34% Colorado, 24% Dodgers, then Minnesota and Houston. So we'd be getting a lot of Colorado, which you wouldn't expect. And then the rest are pretty normal, like Dodgers, Houston, not as much San Francisco. Now, the next thing that you're going to want to figure out is whether you want to, change this min uniques thing, because you're getting your top 50 rated now. And once you start tweaking this, you're no longer getting your top 50. So you have to think about what the benefit is from clicking this min uniques thing to go to 2 or 3 or whatever. And you typically want to do this when you're not comfortable with an over concentration of any one stack or any one player or whatever, or one combination of players. So, but in this particular build, I don't see that issue, because at most we have 34% of one team, which is, I guess that's somewhat aggressive, but it's not overwhelmingly so. So I would probably leave this for min uniques 1 here. And I just wanted to see, it really shouldn't matter too much, but let's just take a look at the pitchers. I'd be getting about, Bassett, Marsh, Canning, like the regular guys. So I actually think that this is a very reasonable. Ooh, I only have 44, so we have to actually change this to 44. I think it's a reasonable thing to do, except, there's one thing I forgot. Take a look at stack exposure and make sure that you're comfortable with this. Like, for example, I don't want 4 2s. I don't want 4 3s. I don't want 3 2 2s. The rest I'll live with. So X these guys out. And then we're just ready to load these. So save to contest. We'll put that into the bat flip for now. And then we'll do the same thing with the Mega 8s, risk-adjusted ROI. Just make sure that, stacks look good. Yep. So let's save these, or this one, sorry. Put this in here. And then we'll go to the ball 4. This, risk-adjusted ROI. And we'll put this in here, And we have a good, kind of beginning structure of what we would want to play. Again, this is a late swap sport, so your lineups at 7:30 should never be the same, really, as they are at the end of the day. You always should be late swapping at every opportunity, because as information changes, you want to adapt to that in some way. Okay, let's do the same thing with FanDuel. And again, same process. Let's first take a look at the sheets, see what we have here. And I do see that there's a little bit, kind of spread out, I guess, in pitching, but it's the same cast of characters, Chris Bassett, Valdez, Marsh, Cortez, and Lopez. So it's going to be some amount of these 5, I imagine. And with respect to the stacks, it would be, if we sort by modified, for example, you have like really top 4 here. You have San Francisco, LA, Houston, Milwaukee. So that's what we're going to expect to see. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to go into SaberSim. Upload. And we'll do the same thing. We'll build 5,000 lineups. And see what we come up with. Now, again, none of this is particularly earth-shattering, you know, but it's you know, there's definitely an art to this, you know, to know when to tweak, know when not to tweak, and all I can show you is how I apply it to different slates. But eventually, you're gonna, you know, not eventually, you also have to figure out on your own when to tweak and when not to. But you have to start with at least the basics of getting good projections up there, running good lineups with high upside, and then running a contest set. I would, before you did anything. And if you didn't have the contest sims, then you know you're definitely operating at a disadvantage. But listen, maybe it's outside your budget or whatever. But that's not the purpose of this discussion. Okay, so let's take a look first and see what we would get normally. Again, same thing. Let's look at the pitchers. And pitchers on FanDuel. In the whole pool, it looks like we'd be getting really spread out ownership. Wow. Like 14% would be the highest. Got some of everybody here. This is crazy. And then with our exposure in the top 50, it'd be more Bassett and Valdez. And same thing, Lopez and Cortez. When you look at stack exposure, pool, wait, who would be the team stacks? Dodgers, Houston, San Francisco. But again, I'm not getting too much Dodgers in the top 50. So let's do the same thing. Let's do contest sims. We'll download our lineups from FanDuel. We're not going to download these, upload these. Boom. And again, same thing. We're going to right-click, add contest sim, and we're going to use our build as the field of lineups. I think can I do that? Yeah, there it is. Monster as well. Okay. And we'll hit run contest sim. Okay, so same thing. Let's look at the squeeze first. Sort by risk-adjusted ROI, and see what we get here. It looks as though about 30% Mets. I like the distribution here. So what that means is that I'm not going to have to go into min unique mode. And you'll see we're pretty contrarian, right? Mets, Yankees, none of the teams that we identified as best plays, which is actually what I like to see. Let's look at stack exposure, though. Let's get rid of some of this dreck. We don't need 4 zeros or 3 2s. We need, I mean, I don't even want 4 2 2s if you want to know the truth. I want to do either 4 4s or 4 3s. And we'll just go ahead and, well, let's look at the pitchers first. It's okay to do a spot check here, but I usually don't look anymore. Valdez, Bassett, Cortez, good. So let's put this in the squeeze. In the qualifier, we have a totally, oh, I thought we had a different, well, we'll use the same. Well, actually, we're not going to, for the monster, yeah, let's put the monster in first. And we'll do the same thing with the squeeze in the and put those into the qualifier as well. Same type of thing. And then again, we'll just download these. And we'll upload them. And again, that's pretty much what I do, and that's pretty much all I want to go over is the process. Now, again, we went over the projections as of now. We went over DraftKings and FanDuel, and we applied those and built actual lineups. And I'll tell you this: if lineups were locking right now, those probably would be the lineups I play, but it's not, so I won't be. But the act of actually doing this is it makes you better at doing it. So that's one of the reasons I go through this. And I do recommend that if you are going to play, you know, MME stuff, you should play the small stuff too, for no other reason than to get used to running this stuff, doing your CSVs and all of that, because it's not particularly intuitive sometimes. And the more time you have to do other stuff, the better. Like, you don't want to be fumbling around with your technology. So again, watch for the Twins as far as the weather goes. Aside from that, I'm hoping to be around at 6 o'clock. It could be a tough one. If I can't make it, I'll try to ping the Discord. Maybe I'll be a little bit late, but that's pretty much all I have. No questions. Good.